This video will show you how I laid out and carved this pattern in this oak panel. This work is stuff I learned from studying oak furniture made in Devon in England and Ipswich in Massachusetts during the 17th century. And these carvings are the subjects of two sets of drawings I have available that I developed with Jeff Lefkowitz. So details about that is on my blog, and here on this channel you can see a number of these carving videos that are companions to those drawings. So let's dive in and look at this one. What I've done to get ready is I have nailed the panel to this pine plank, and then the holdfasts hold the pine down. And you don't have to do it that way. You can clamp your panel directly. I like this method because then the holdfasts are never in the way of the carving. Never is probably a generous term. And I've just struck a 1-inch margin all around, and a vertical center line, and then struck an arc from that vertical center line just to describe the arch at the top of the panel. So that's all pretty straightforward stuff. I will try to go according to those step-by-step drawings I did, but I'm sure I'll deviate from them, especially once I get carving. So the next step is to describe the inside of that arch, and I usually make that something like 3/8 of an inch wide. Yeah, that's what it is on the drawing. But I mostly will eyeball that. And yeah, that's 1/2 an inch actually. But I'll scratch that around. And then from that center point, I will scribe a diagonal line out beyond the arch in that corner there called a spandrel. And you could probably live without that line, but I find it helps me make the spandrel symmetrical. And when I am carving one of these panels, I tend to do all the layout with an awl and a compass and a square and a marking gauge. I'll do some with pencil here so it will show up on the video, because it's hard to pick these lines up on the video. I forgot to say that this panel is different size than what I drew in the plans. And a nice feature about this sort of pattern is that you can stretch it across its width or across its length pretty easily and still work out similar design. There's a lot of flexibility in these, and in fact there are few hard and fast rules. So I think I said the upper and lower edges of the urn are what I do next, just striking square lines across here, and where those fall, I think they're about 1/4 of the way up the panel. I don't know if I even said in the drawing. It looks like I did less than that here. 1, 2, 3, 4, not quite 1/5. I'm going to bring them up almost 1/4. I've got a photograph here, and they look like, yeah, there. 3 steps, and that would be the 4th. It's a little beyond there. So something like that. And I'll just guess that by setting the compass. So that is 4. I'm going to come up a little higher. Yeah, that's what I'm going to use. So that'll be the top of it. And I'll strike across there with a square. And I wanted it to be about, the urn to be about, it's 2 1/4 inches altogether. I stepped it up a little. I'm going to make it 2 1/2 in this case. And then there's a top and a bottom to it, almost like a collar to the urn. So all of that is designated by just lines drawn 90 degrees across the panel. And now I'll use the compass. I want this 3 inches wide. Set that to, let's make it a little wider. And so that and that. Off of the center line, I just swung those 2 marks to designate the width of that urn. And now I'm going to do, this will be a center line for that, and then I'm going to scribe. Because that might stay there. And now, so I've got the bottom and the top of the urn, a horizontal center line, and I'm going to use the compass to draw the end of the urn. So I know it's going to end here, and I know that's the size circle I want to designate that. So it's just that. So I take the compass, it's set to describe that circle, and I know that circle is going to end, its edge is going to be out there. So that finds me where that center point is. So there's the ends of the urn, and then here it'll be straight lines drop down and up. And you can do those with a marking gauge from here if you want. Now, at that stage, I'm going to come up about 1/3 of the way up the panel's height. So just guess that. That's way too much. And that's exactly right on. Or so close that it's fine with me. So I've made a mark here, 1/3 of the way up from the bottom, and I'm just going to score a little line. This square doesn't reach across on the margins, just inside the margins on both sides. And that is going to, I'm going to draw these little figures. I describe them as a cursive E and a number 3. And they are for these volutes right here. So one turns down, and one turns up. About like that. So that's the E, this is the 3. Like so. Now, I've got this one taller than that one, and you can carry those across if you want. See, that one, I wanted it to come up, and this one down like that. They don't have to be the exact same heights. I'd be surprised if these two were. Yeah. I don't know that this photograph is shot right on the money, but these don't even look like they're the same heights. So from there, I then have another single volute. This one is one of the next things I establish, and that looks like it falls at the midpoint along the height of the panel. Whoopsie. A little lower than the midpoint. And I don't know where the middle of my panel is. I didn't check its horizontal middle. It's not there. That makes these closer than I thought. It'd come up a little higher than that, right up there. I keep putting this square away, but I need it still. And that one is just a single scroll like that. It's easy to get these turned around. But they want to mirror each other this way and that way. Like that. So that is, and then this inside arc just sort of curves to the margin like that. And now what I'll do is I'll draw in, I'm looking at the what I said to do. And the sequence that you make these cuts and things will vary a lot. So now comes this outline here and there that sort of dive into these volutes, left and right. They come just above the flower pot there, like that, and they droop down like that. The ones above sort of mirror it. They don't reach the center, the vertical center line. There's going to be a stalk coming out of the flower pot. And then they arc up. And bend into there. So I think I'll draw 2 more lines and then do a little bit of carving. the next line comes to this other volute right here and curves up again towards the stalk above the center point for the arcs, and bends way down like that. So those will be a little daunting for some of you in the beginning, but you'll find if you get to see a lot of carvings or old pictures of carvings, you'll find a lack of symmetry left and right. It's what I often call an approximate symmetry, and that's really what we're after. I didn't do the feet to the urn, and those curve down from here, from the bottom, and sweep out. And you can measure that point, left and right. Mine came over 1.75 inches, and notched in a little from the inside, so about like that. So I'll cut a little of this. You'll start to see it a little better. And it's all V-tool work, so you get a lot of practice with your V-tool. Those cuts are some of the easiest, cutting straight across the panel. I'll leave the details of the urn for right now. I'm going to work on just some of the outlining. And this cut, we'll do the top one. You can turn yourself around and come up from here. Like that. And then those don't meet. They just about will when there's a stalk in there. And I'll cut these volutes. The way I carved it and the way I drew it don't agree. I want to have the low point. I've got it drawn too far over there, so I'm going to come over like that. And when the whole panel is carved, you hide a multitude of sins. There, I've enlarged this a little. now. There, those first few bits start to really define the sections of the carving. I'll cut the arch. And then the inside of it, and it'll connect now like that. The feet of the urn come up from the margin like that. Now, where am I? What does it say to do next? Oh, just start to fill in all the rest. So there's leaves that droop down out of here and curl against the bottom of the urn. So a lot of these shapes you're going to start to see terminate in these volutes. And so I will often draw that, the end of that piece, the volute, and use that as target for where I'm going. This is going to curl up. Here's the corner of my panel there. This curls up in front of that corner, but then has a rounded bit here that sort of swerves out of that. It's just like a big teardrop shape there. And then from the volute, this arcs over near the urn and blends under that. So just a large curving shape filling in that space. Here's the vertical margin. I'll carve this one. that. Now just connect that. For now I'll stop because I think there's a solid section right there and down here as well. So sometimes the hardest part is taking that shape and drawing its mirror image on the other side. But that isn't just hard for us today, that was hard for them in the 17th century too. And so you can get away with a lot. And then it curves up. You could carry this point across if you'd like to try to get the bottom of this to line up with the bottom of that one. This is a case where I usually don't bother with that sort of thing. It's kind of flat. Might bring that up just a little bit. Curve up like that. So that establishes those. And the next area I'll go is up under the arch to the top of that and then fill in this middle. There's several components to that upper part. There's this tulip shape here and then this sort of bud shape or something, and then these two large rounded shapes with the three segments to them, and they almost mirror each other. They're related, and they all come out of this band in the middle here. So I'll establish that band first, I guess. That falls just, I had started it right here. It falls just above that center point for the arch, and it doesn't reach very far, so you use a smaller square. I made it about 5/8 of an inch tall. And I forget how wide. Two inches on my panel. This panel's a little bit wider. I don't know that it matters. And this one, I'm not going to bother trying to draw that with a compass. That's more trouble than it's worth. Now, the tulip shape, it's three pieces. If I have a blank piece of paper here. It's a rounded leaf and then flanking it left and right, a leaf like that, and then a stem in the middle. It's a common motif in this body of work. So I try to get the center part of it, that rounded piece, I try to get that to hit that diagonal line right there. It bumps right against the arch, right at that diagonal line. Then one of its pieces comes up nearly to the top center, just a little bit off of it, and then runs down to its middle. The other one, it'll blend into that V-tool line right there, like that. And it has a stalk which comes out of this business right here. That's too thick. across here. It's much narrower than that. That's more like it. And then it has a leaf coming off of here to match a leaf coming off of there. Let me cut the tulip one first and show you how to go from there. These they don't connect. These don't meet. And then this, just a rounded top like that. So this section is it has three parts, maybe easier to see on the drawing. It has this rounded leaf here, a middle round part, and then this one that connects to that volute. And many of these are patterns and elements that appear over and over and over in these carvings from Devon in England and Ipswich in Massachusetts. Now the leaf that's sort of laying beside that is very similar, and it's funny how they just sort of squeeze it in where they can, and it has that first sort of little hooked leaf, a rounded one, and then one more coming this way that has yet another volute, small, right there. I know that seems really intimidating, but try to draw it a couple of times, and that will help you. I'm going to do this part next. So to finish up the V-tool, to get out of there, all I do is lower the handle of the V-tool to sort of stop that cut. I'll cut straight across this collar here. And just to finish this section off, here's that stalk. And now this comes, touches that, then arcs away from it to this volute. So that's that bit, and then above it are these little buds or leaves that come up out of that piece. Sometimes it helps to look at the negative shape. This is all going to be removed And that helps you see things a little differently as well. So, you're tired of hearing me say, well, it starts with a volute up here, and then curves really just a big fat round bit all the way down to that stalk. And what happens inside it is think of this part right here is almost a closed circle on that center line. And then it does that. Like that. Here's the other part of the other side. Tulip shape. Which will help me see where this goes. And if it helps you, you can use a compass to say, here's my center line, that's the edge of this pattern, and that's the edge of this one. I happen to have drawn it just evenly, sometimes you don't. And the compass is one way to sort of get around that bit. And likewise, you can grab your square. If I want that bottom leaf to hit the arch there, that gives me a target here for drawing that one and getting it, close to symmetrical. And then it comes off of here. And this one curves back up that way. So you can watch the pattern too, look at the drawing to see where everything goes. I'm working from the photograph, but it amounts to the same thing. So I'll go ahead and cut all that, and then we'll fill in that last bit. Then the rest is just details. This is just establishing the sections of the carving. What you carve first doesn't really matter. So a lot of this turning and moving is done in my feet. I'm shifting around this way and that to get at these different curves. And now this inside shape here. like that. The last bit for the inside of the panel, well, no, there is no last bit. I'm going to keep on carving until there is no more. But there's, again, 3 leaves. So this shape here, a big round one, and a big arcing one that comes down to hit there. And these are some of the easiest things to do on this panel. And this one, it can come all the way to the volute on the carved panel I'm looking at in the photograph. It doesn't. But it blends out of that vertical center line. And then sort of reaches down to that volute. There is a curved line right there between those 2 volutes, that top and bottom one. And then these curves, they'll come out of that volute, they'll round out here, and tuck into that one. The very first pieces I carved, just about, are the insides of these. In the description, I talked about them like the eyes in ancient Egyptian artwork, and they have a border cut at the top edge that mimics right there. It comes a little bit around here, and a little bit around here, and then well, I'll break it up. There's a rounded section here, a nearly pointed leaf like that, and then a partially rounded section there. So this one, that. Probably the first thing to cut would be this border. So the leaf shape and then that just goes like that. So here, this is another volute. These guys were crazy for them. And that's all you need to cut in there. Now, see, when we get to the background, this is all coming up right there. And that can even, whoops, I can even hook down a little more to make it match this one. At this point, it's a little bit of a game of what am I missing? And there's an outline that echoes this shape. And sort of dies. It comes down here and fades out. Like that. So I'll carve those bits. There's more detail that'll happen in there, but I'll deal with it when we get to working on those individual parts. And I'll finish the urn. And then really just the spandrel shapes and all that V-tool work and the stalk. This comes back like that from the stalk. So I'll do those. I'll do one of the spandrels, and at that point I think we can start cutting out the background. So this line is not going to connect anywhere, it's just going to stop, and that's the one where I just lower the handle of the V-tool. I can't get at this part. This has to curve right around. And then lower the handle, come in low here, and then come up and down. And yeah, the stalk. There's lots of different spandrel patterns. The spandrel is this little triangular section out here. And I'm going to do one that has a central leaf and a volute and a leaf there, and then a leaf that fades into that. There's a few different versions drawn on my plans. I think the ones on this set of plans are pretty similar. And on the first set of plans, there's a different one, I think. It's really tight quarters. Sometimes I strike these with gouges, but I'm trying to do all the outline here with the V-tool. And then to see that again, there's a leaf that sort of comes from behind that volute, and then one that blends into everything else under there. So this line can come right up here as a continuation. that. There's a little connecting bit here, and there, and there. Same going this way, like that. And that's enough for now. I'll carve that, and that'll be the whole outline. Then we'll go on to cutting the backgrounds. The next piece I'm going to do then is to remove the background. And the most important part of that, perhaps, is to make sure what you're cutting out is the background. It's, at this stage, with all that V-tool work, it's really easy to get sort of on the wrong side of the line. So refer to the image and you'll see that something like that is the background. You don't want to cut this. This stays solid. And I use tools that have very little curvature. Not quite flat. The corners of the piece is still a gouge, but pretty shallow. And I tend at first to use the mallet just to start to break out all of that material, and it you head towards the V-tool line and it comes up. And I won't show you all this process because it's so redundant, but enough so you see how to get at it. I'm holding the tool down low like that in the curl of my fingers and then striking with the gouge. You can also use hand pressure, in which case it's the same way to grip the tool, and then my other hand on the handle. With hand pressure, it's easier to slip than with the mallet. You can switch hands. Now I've got my fingertips under the tool, my thumb on the what we call the flute. Come like that. And so you tend to do a lot of back and forth. And in a space like the one I'm in now, there's not a lot of room, there's not a lot of material to remove, so it goes pretty quickly. There's a little shred hanging on in there. And I don't need or want a dead flat background. It's faceted. Here you see some chips that didn't let go, so I then just take the tool and stand it up and sever those like that. Try to get those off of there. And likewise, right there. This background's all going to get textured with a punch afterwards. And painted too. They don't always get painted, but I frequently paint them. And that will there I've stood the tool up on its edge and working just with the corner going in like that to get in there. This is enough to use the mallet. And you can run along the fibers, along the grain, or across it. run down that line like that. I've sharpened this tool with a slight crown to its edge. It's not dead straight across. And I find that really helpful. As they come to you, they're straight across like that. You can make either one of them work. I find this one is really the one I use the most. It's only ½ inch wide. So a larger section like that, I can go to the wider tool and then I'll use the narrower one to take out the final cuts right near the limits of the shapes. So while I have the large tool, I'll come down here. And maybe you can see I'm holding the mallet way down on the handle like that to swing it. I find that gets me a better stroke than choking up on it a lot. I taught one time in England and they don't know what choking up means because they don't play baseball. But some people hold the mallet way up high, even onto the head like that, and they make it work. I've just never had any experience like that, and never really had any success with holding it that way. If you're working sawn wood, which many of you will be, most of you might be, you run into more cantankerous grain patterns that way, and trimming this background down. Then on sawn stock you have to sometimes be more careful than I do here on this ribbon wood. Because the grain direction here isn't an issue, but it might be on a sawn panel, so you need to watch that as you go. And the wood will tell you which way it wants to cut. This stuff cut every which way, pretty much. And the goal is to get down really to the bottom of the V-tool lines in most cases. Some places you won't have enough space to maneuver the tool. In which case then you tilt it this way to get at it, bring it down to the depth. Like I said, it's not going to be a consistent depth. It doesn't need to be. The one way you can approach it is to make the cuts right at the V-tool lines first. Then I have this high part here to take out, and now it'll break free and lessen the chance of me hitting that piece I want to keep. Most of these spaces are so small that it isn't a big deal to take out this background. For a panel this size, it goes pretty quickly, you find. It can be a little surprising. There's one element I've yet to carve down there that I need to add, so I'll go back up to the top here. And I just broke off the tip of that tulip, but that doesn't matter. And you can sort of arc right around something like that while you just pivot the tool around it. I need to stab down again. Like that. A line like that one that I just cut, you can do that here. You bring the tool so that its corner is up in the air, and this one is headed down toward the depth of that V-tool line, and just bank along there. This one you have to cut up that way off these, so you're cutting off those supported fibers like that, and then take that out. In this area here, that you can almost just pop out, and then that little diamond, just cut it this way and that. Let go. Sometimes they just don't let go, and you gotta go in and vertically stab them again on that outline. In the spandrel, there's very little to come out. Tiny bit there, tiny bit there, so I'm really just wiggling the tool in there. That. Whoops. This tiny little triangle right there. comes out. The top of this. There's a little leaf shape that sort of sticks up into there. And you can do that with the V-tool. You can strike it with a gouge even. Let's see if this gouge will do it. So it sort of blends into the point there where those two come together. Then the bottom corner is empty. So it probably doesn't make sense to strike that one with the gouge after outlining so much with the V-tool. But it's how I've always done it. So some of these things are just habits. There's no reason for them beyond that. Like that. And so I'll cut the other half of the background down, and then we'll start to work on some of the details. So if you've seen me texture panel before, I use this punch, and it's bedlam. I strike it with a hammer, not with the mallet, and I'll spare you listening to all of that. Many people wear ear protection when they do this step. But I'll do that whole background with that punch, and then we'll go from there. Now to begin some of the simple accents. There's two different gouges I use, both a similar curve, and they establish these veins in these leaves, or what, I'm not quite sure what they're supposed to be, but I know where they go and what shape they have. And so this is a wide one. This is 3/4 of an inch, this gouge, and I'm working just on these tulip shapes right now, and I cut those two going left and right, and then come right behind them and take a chip out. So the first cut, the tool is vertical, and then you tilt the handle away or back and take that little chip out. Right like that. And that is going to be much of what this next exercise is. Then there's maybe another one that echoes that doesn't get a chip cut out of it. It stays right like that. Now the tool turns that way, and you cut 3, maybe 4 of these. I could only fit 3, and every other one gets a chip cut out. Like that. And that's a lot of what I'm going to be doing on this piece. These round bits get the same treatment. And let me see, we're going to try to get a third in there. And they also run up this piece, banking off the vertical center line. So I might go to a third tool to get wider ones below that. Just like that. All a similar curve. And on the edges of this, they're much like on the sides of the tulips there. And they sort of run diagonally, fanning out a bit, like that. Same kind of treatment here. Is that what I drew too? Yeah, that's the round bit. So there I'm going to switch to the narrower version of the tool. But a vertical strike, flanking it left and right. Here it's very tight quarters. So I'll take that middle bit out. Right there. And right there. And then on these, one, two, three, 1, 2, 3, about. These shapes that are sitting here on the sides, they have this business sort of fanning like that. And in here, what do we have in the middles? Just as before. Do that way. And on here, same gig, but not on here. You see how it starts to fill in the spaces, even just with that with that one technique on all those leaves. Down here it'll be a little different, and in here it's much the same. And in the middle, I'm going to go, I think, to the smaller tool for the top of it. But then I can do a broader one below. There's more to come in there. And the urn is a little different. I forgot to take these chips out. It's easy to forget stuff because there's so much going on. Some of the accents are lines cut with V-tools, really just sort of outlines like that, and a curving line. Coming like that, I can strike a little stop cut. Should have done that first with that very narrow tool like that. Then the V comes up to that. So this one's hard to get at. So, and then another one like that. While I'm here, I'll do this one. Easier coming this way. And if you have a hard time getting at them, you can turn the panel around. Because that gets a little clumsy after a while. Up in this business, there can be two. I keep forgetting. thing on here. That's really a short line. These get beveled right there, as if this stuff is coming out of yet another vase. And while I'm doing that beveling, this arch is oftentimes flat, but sometimes it's shaped. And I do that with, on the outside of the curve, with the bevel up like that, coming up the arch. All the way to the top. Going down, I have to do it bevel down. I can't get the tool to work bevel up this way. And it's just creating a little bit of convexity to that arch shape. And then come on the other side. Come around. Like that. Later I'll do some work to decorate the inside of that band of that arch in here. I did most of the spandrel with the smaller gouge. And by now you know the drill. And the top of it gets two of these. Oops. That piece came loose. And if it comes off, it comes off. I don't bother to try to put it back. Some might. This space has too much emptiness to it, so another V-tool line. And that one just fades in and out. So you start out narrow and shallow. It gets deeper and therefore wider. Now I lighten up the cut, lower the handle like that. And these get beveled like the arch did. So you come up to this side, the bevel up, come up to the top. Now I got to come up here, and that's because the fibers are running here. If I come down them, I'm going to tear into them. But if I come up them like this, they have support ahead of the cut and will shear off nicely. Here I have to have the bevel down to get in there, like that. Come up here. but the inside of it doesn't get a bevel. It's just the outside of that piece. Down in here, more of these curved lines coming from there, like that. Those two came out perfect. Oh, I forgot them in the top of this spandrel. Has really tight space. Very small. You want to take lighter cuts then, because too heavy an emphasis on that cut, you could chip the whole thing out, lose the whole bit. So I'll work these, and then I think we'll do some punch work. So these have a couple different ways you can treat them. I sketched in some of it. The first bit I'll do is this area where I sort of carved that echo of the shape. That gets a bevel like that. So this stays the full original height, and it's beveled down to that inside V-tool line. And here I have to come down this way. So you can see the light changing as I'm working on this. Been at it for off and on for most of the day, and now it's getting to be later in the afternoon and light is changing. So that's just that bevel echoing that shape. Then there's another echo of it. I drew that on there. So that's another V-tool line. So you can just cut that out like the background and have a recessed portion there. But another way to treat that is to make it a beveled shape in that outline. So I'm just cutting that. Like that. So it makes it a little convex there. Then various ways to treat the resulting space. One of which just starts with a V-tool like that. So I'll do that same thing over here. This works better if this whole thing is a little broader, so I could have brought it almost to touching the vase, the flower pot, but I didn't. because it becomes a lot of detail for a small space. Yeah, just trying to round off the bottom end of that. That's going to get just two little strikes of a gouge in it. Like that. And like that. And then later there'll be a little punch there. Well, what have we got? It's really just coming down to, do I have any spaces left, and what am I going to do about them? And then I can do a smaller one inside that. I guess I could fit a third here and there. Oh, and I see I forgot to punch that. See how that can happen? That doesn't punch as well because the panel is beveled on its underneath side there, so it's not so well supported. The urn will round it over just by taking that background tool and running it with its bevel up right across the fibers there. Like that. And a little band right across the middle of it that'll get defined with a V tool. Now, what I want is to bevel that and this and bevel down there, and I'll get right in the way of that other camera and go this way. Now, and then one more left and right of that center. And from there, I want to round off each of those. And it's just to make it look like a decorated flower pot. Like that. Just the tiniest piece coming out of there really just the corner of your tool will fit in there to pop that out. Oops, took part of that off. And then you can just lightly bevel these cuts. So this isn't removing the chip behind that gouge cut, it's beveling it ahead of it. Like that. Then we'll do the same coming underneath. This is narrow, rounded gouge. So I'm just holding it in my fingertips that way and striking. You don't do the very outer one. And I forgot the middle one. Like that. I'm going to use a different gouge to get in there. This is narrower. Can fit in there a little better. This one does not have its corners rounded off. So a little better suited for this step. Yeah. And then, like I said, I gotta see which way I'm going. Coming down. Just like that. Can take that chip out. I was wrong. You're doing both. Take the chip out behind the cut and bevel in front of the cut to give that more three-dimensional look. That is the urn or the flower pot. The stalk gets a little bevel as it comes out of there. We have to treat the bottom here, and then some more punch work. The bottom, well, there's different ways of doing it. I'm going to use that gouge and come up like that, and maybe a bigger one to go down to the base. And take that out in the bottom with the V-tool. Remove that. That looks kind of stilted to me. I'm going to extend this as a V-tool line that fades out. It'll break up the space better. Like that. And then even bevel beside that to sort of make this leaf reseed back there. Like that. Often these patterns have circular punch, sometimes a very small size, sometimes pretty broad. Typically I use a heavy nail set. This is a 5/32 nail set, and that's the one I use the most, but some of these I've been carving lately have really tiny little points, tiny little punch. This one is 2/32 of all things, and this one is in between. I'm going to use the in between one today, and where these go can vary wildly. I just noticed something though before I go anywhere. I'm going to strike a line across that. It's just scored, it's not going to be carved, and likewise on the top and bottom of the flower pot. Like that. And this piece will get beveled. But the punch, it can go almost everywhere. Well, often you see it along the stalk there, on the center of the piece, and here it is left and right of that business, but then you can't have too many of them. I'm going to put one underneath there as well, and wherever those points, remember I made that cut to stop the V-tool, be right above those. Up in here can be at the juncture of those sort of leaf shapes, and in the center there, and in the tulip left and right, and in the spandrel. One spandrel has a bunch of them, one spandrel has fewer. I'm just going to put 3. That's backwards. That's backwards. I'll put 2 there, 2 there. One goes here, one goes there, and there, and there. This business, that can be the punch that did the background actually. But out on the front of this, whoops, hold on to it. Out on the front of this is a whole row of them. And these pieces have it right at the ends of those 2 little arcs I struck. In the flower pot, you could put one in each of those lobes. I told you can't have too many. I'm going to put 2 in this, and I don't know where else. This looks a little blank. We'll have to do something in there. And as I said, that I'll strike with the other punch, that background punch I was using. This wants beveling. I missed beveling that top and bottom. And so that's just straight across the panel with the bevel of the tool up to make this convex, not concave. And you can even round off its ends. oh, I know what I wanted to do. The punch in the arch. This on the photograph, the arch is blank. On many of these panels, there's a whole range of those. And to make it even more fun, you can put parentheses around those with a gouge. I'd much rather have this than that arch be blank, but you see them both ways. Like that. Oops. And you don't need to knock a chip out behind those, but you could if you wanted to. That might be enough. I could add punch here and there. He's got one right there for some reason. So I'm going to put the tools away, and I'm going to apply a finish to this, and you'll be able to see as that happens what effect a finish has on the carving. It's a positive effect. It's really a big difference. And then I'll come back in a day and I'll paint the backgrounds and show you that as well. So the finish I use is just a really refined linseed oil, an artist's grade linseed oil, thinned with that citrus thinner. And you'll see very quickly what effect it has. All of the cuts absorb the oil differently than just the surface does. So you end up with an even more pronounced effect of all that carving. So this is a two-step process. I oil the panel and then let it sit a day or so. And then I'll come back and paint the background. So the usual cautions apply when using this. The danger is disposing of the rag, and you need to be very careful about that. I spread them out flat outside and soak them in water and then let them dry and then dispose of them. But first I just slobber the oil all the way on, trying to fill all those cavities and cuts. So really try to push that oil in there. And then I'll take a dry cloth and mop up all the excess. And that's the cloth I have to be careful with about disposal. This one stays in the oil. And as long as there's enough oil that it's not exposed to the air, that one's not a problem. It's the one that does the mop up. Paper towels are the worst because they shred. I just lost a pile of rags. I don't know where they are, and rather than spend 10 minutes looking for them, I'll mop this up with a paper towel. You can also take the oily rag and leave it in a can of water, and then spread it out to dry afterwards. It's when they're bunched up that they create a problem. That's my understanding anyway. And then I don't want to find out about it. Painting the backgrounds of these carvings, it takes longer to set it up and clean it up than it does to do it. And you could use all kinds of paints and materials. I tend to mix my own paint with dry pigments and linseed oil. And when I did the book with Jenny Alexander about making a joint stool with Lost Art Press, we went through a whole harangue of mixing the paint with a glass muller on a piece of plate glass. But that was a larger quantity of paint than this. And here I'm dealing in such a small amount of paint that I just mix it with the brush. So here's a jar of iron oxide pigment, and I just poured a little bit of linseed oil into this little can and stir that pigment in there with the brush, and it's the same linseed oil I just oiled the panel with, so thinned out with some citrus thinner, and then dissolve the pigment in there. Modern pigments are ground so fine they'll mix into the oil pretty readily. One of the things that can be a bit of a hassle with making these paints is getting them to dry. So I just bought some fast drying medium at an art supply store, and you could probably just use that by itself to mix the paint, but I just mix this into the linseed oil and pigment here, and you're covering such a small area on this panel that you don't need to mix a lot of paint at once. I don't like to have any left over. And as far as what you color, I'm going to do it in two colors, in the red and the black. And I'll do this large area here in the red, and just using a small brush, again from an art supply store. So it's like a three-dimensional coloring book. And because the panel's been oiled, if I do stray onto that, you can often wipe it up right away. And if you get some on there that you need to get off, and you find you can't wipe it off, you can scrape it off later and then re-oil where you scraped it. And what colors in that period, you don't find a great variety of colors: reds, yellows, and browns, black. So what they call the earth colors. Unfortunately, to really know what they were using, you need a person with a microscope to analyze the finish, and that doesn't happen very often. The few times I've been involved in cases where they've done a paint study, you're finding things like iron oxide, which is what this red is, red lead, which isn't all that appealing to me, and yellow ochres and umber, and then various black made from various elements, what's called bone black, charcoal black, ivory black, and all of these are readily available. You could just buy, if you didn't want to mix paint, you could buy a tube of oil paints, and that's a little liquid there. I'd want to kind of spread this out. Thin coats will dry more easily than a heavier coat, and I only do one coat on this stuff. I don't go over it again. So I've done that in red. I'll do these areas in red. In between those will be black, and out here will be black. So what you want to make sure is that if you do this right hand side, this section in red, you do that one too. That's the only real hard and fast rule. And sometimes I use a stick like that to steady my hand, because I don't want to stick the heel of my hand in some paint and drag it across the panel. It's quieter than carving. So then these spaces are getting smaller. I'll do maybe those sections in black and do around the tulips in red. Let's see. There are times when you could use an even smaller brush, I guess. Soon. Areas there to finish up here. I'm going to have a lot more red paint than I need. And you can do it all in one color. Doesn't have to alternate colors all the time. So that will be black. Out in the spandrels, I guess I'll do the black, and in here goes red and those are black. Maybe I'll do the bottom corners in red. So you can see such a small amount of paint I actually needed. Oh yeah, that's too much there. And now same routine with the black. Really so little to say and do about it. Watching somebody paint this is only slightly more interesting than watching the paint dry. And the red was so easy in part because it was going into bigger spaces. But it also mixed better than this black has. So my only suggestion to you is before you turn a camera on, see how the paint is working. And then it's a matter of using that panel however it's going to be used, whether it's going to go in a frame, just be a framed panel on the wall, or part of a piece of furniture.